You're being ridiculous, Mia. Eric needs this more than you do, my mom said, waving the deed in my face during what was supposed to be a joyful housewarming party. He has a family to support. What do you have? Just yourself? The words hit me like a slap across the face. I stood there in the kitchen of the house I'd spent my entire life savings on, struggling to breathe as my world crumbled around me. My name is Mia Reynolds, and at 33, I never imagined I'd be betrayed by my own family like this. As a nurse at Memorial Hospital, I'd spent the last 10 years working double shifts, picking up extra hours in the ICU, and saving every penny I could. When my parents faced foreclosure on their old house, I stepped in with my life savings, $175,000, to help them buy a new place. The agreement was crystal clear. The house would be in my name since I provided the down payment. But apparently, agreements don't mean much to my family. My stepbrother Eric, my mom's golden child from her second marriage, stood there with his usual smug grin. He'd never contributed a dime to our parents' well being, always too busy finding himself while jumping from one failed business venture to another. But now, at 38, he suddenly had a wife and a baby on the way, which apparently made him more deserving of my investment. We've already filed the paperwork, my stepdad George chimed in, not even looking me in the eye. The house is in Eric's name now. You should be happy you're helping your brother start his family. The casual way he dismissed my sacrifice made my blood boil. The beautiful colonial style house I'd fallen in love with, the one I'd imagined as a gathering place for family holidays and celebrations, was being handed over to someone who hadn't earned it. Looking around the room at the faces of extended family and friends who'd come to celebrate, I could see the awkward glances and whispered conversations. My Aunt Sarah, who'd always been more of a mother to me than my own mom, stood in the corner shaking her head in disbelief. My best friend Rachel, who'd watched me work myself to exhaustion to save that money, gripped her glass so tight I thought it might shatter. This isn't right, I managed to say, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. That money was everything I had. We had an agreement. Oh, stop being so dramatic, my mom sighed, rolling her eyes. You're a nurse, you'll save it up again. Eric needs a stable home for his baby. It's not like you have anyone to provide for. That's when something inside me snapped. Years of being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always sacrificed for others, came crashing down. As I looked at their entitled faces, I knew this wouldn't end here. They had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. Growing up, I always knew I was different from Eric in my parents' eyes. After my dad passed away when I was 6, my mom remarried George within a year. Eric came into our lives like a whirlwind, immediately becoming the center of their universe. While I spent my weekends studying and working part-time at the local pharmacy to save for college, Eric was showered with new cars, expensive clothes, and endless second chances. I put myself through nursing school, working nights as a CNA, and taking out student loans that I'm still paying off. Every time Eric's business ventures failed, the car wash, the supplement company, the cryptocurrency investment opportunity, my parents would drain their savings to bail him out. I watched them refinance their house 3 times to cover his mistakes, saying nothing even as I saw their retirement slipping away. When they called me 6 months ago, desperate and in tears because they were about to lose their house, I didn't hesitate. I had been saving for my own place, dreaming of a small cottage with a garden where I could finally put down roots. We searched for properties for weeks, and during that time, I stumbled across a colonial style home on Maple Street that immediately captured my heart. The realtor was encouraging, helping us with the paperwork, and I signed the preliminary documents as the rightful owner. You're a blessing, sweetheart, my mom had said at the time, hugging me close and promising this would all work out for the best. I wanted so badly to trust those words. I overlooked the furtive chats with my stepbrother Eric and the private meetings with that lawyer I knew nothing about. I turned a blind eye to every red flag because I believed that deep down, my parents would not stab me in the back. My friend Rachel was always more practical. Make sure you have everything in writing, she kept urging over coffee. I have this weird feeling, but I defended my family's intentions, telling her they would never go against our signed agreement. Why would they? They needed me, and I believed they valued me. Soon enough, the housewarming party was announced, and I happily went to pick out new decorations. I picked up pretty kitchen towels, a cute welcome mat, and new pillows for the living room, never suspecting that I'd be the only one left out in the cold. That dreamlike feeling came to a brutal halt when they broke the news in the kitchen that day, tossing aside our original agreement like it never existed. I recall looking down at my phone in an attempt to make sense of the betrayal, my head swimming from the shock. Then Rachel came up to me, leaning in and quietly insisting, "You need a lawyer. This can't be legitimate without your signature." A short while later, Eric strolled by with his wife Jessica, bragging about his renovation ideas, promising to tear down walls and remodel the very rooms I had lovingly decorated. My stomach churned at the thought. Eventually, I spotted the folder, crammed with the official papers I had signed weeks before, sitting atop the refrigerator. In a moment of adrenaline fueled stealth, I slipped it into my handbag and headed out the back door to gather my thoughts. Outside, my hands were shaking. As I flipped through the documents, there was our authentic agreement, crystal clear, stating I was the rightful owner, because I had put up the down payment. That alone should have been enough to protect me. But then I spied a legal notice, dated just 2 weeks back, cautioning my parents that transferring the deed without my approval was blatantly illegal. My phone lit up with a text from my mother, telling me to quit sulking and to celebrate Eric's big moment. That was my cue. It was time to stand up for myself, whether or not it looked like family unity. I contacted Marcus, my friend Rachel's brother, who specialized in real estate law. I asked if I could see him the very next morning, and he was quick to respond. Walking back into that house, I forced a neutral expression and caught my mother, George, and Eric scheming in the living room. It was as if they considered me a minor obstacle, nothing more. They were startled that I showed none of the tears or desperation they expected. They got a pleasant smile instead. "Actually, I wanted to say thank you," I told them calmly. "Thank you for opening my eyes." It must have been unsettling to see me turn around and walk away without throwing any sort of tantrum. Once I left, I overheard Eric chuckling behind me, declaring I would get over whatever was troubling me. Right then, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't get over it, but I would make sure they never forgot what they'd done. Bright and early the next day, I sat across from Marcus in his office, my nerves buzzing with anticipation. We reviewed every page of the documents I had collected, his gaze growing increasingly grave. The lawyer letter he pulled out was the key, bluntly mentioning that the deed transfer would become outright fraud if done without my sign-off. By the time he finished, Marcus fixed me with a resolute stare. "Mia, they really messed this up," he said. "They've left a paper trail showing your funds, plus that clause requiring the house be in your name. A fraudulent deed can be undone." I only managed to choke out. "But they took the house already. It's in Eric's name, and they're telling everyone it belongs to him now." Marcus shook his head. "Not for long. That's what the courts are for. If they forged anything, we could be talking criminal charges. Even if they didn't forge it, they're in breach of contract at best." Those words made my pulse pound. Criminal charges? I stared into my coffee, uncertain if I was prepared for that. After all, this was my family. But as Marcus reminded me, it was also the same family that had just robbed me of everything I'd worked for. By taking a fraudulent route, they had practically invited legal repercussions upon themselves. So, I told him I wanted the house back. Plain and simple. I needed my property restored, and a clear reminder to them that what they did had steep consequences. Marcus promised to file an injunction preventing my parents or Eric from doing work on the house. He also intended to take steps to void the illegal transfer. The instant I left his office, I could breathe a bit easier, like I'd finally come up for air. I headed to my ICU shift and tried to bury myself in caring for patients, but the phone buzzed constantly with dozens of messages from my mother and Eric. First outraged, then frantic, they demanded to know what I'd done. I powered the phone off. They could wait Doc the next day. Utter chaos erupted. I heard from Rachel that Eric and my mom had shown up in front of my apartment. They were apparently yelling about me ruining the family. When I confronted them face to face, they talked up every excuse, from Eric's unborn child needing stability to me not understanding real obligation. I calmly produced a letter from their lawyer, the original contract naming me as owner, and a copy of my bank statement proving the down payment. Their faces dropped, the bluff laid bare. Then came the guilt tripping. My mom asked, "Would you send your own mother to jail?" I promptly reminded her that I wasn't forcing anything. They'd done this to themselves. Eric glared, his cheeks flushing as he realized that the police had already visited the Maple Street property, asking questions about the deed. They left me in a flurry, desperate to contain the sudden legal firestorm. Rachel, who had been watching from her car to make sure I was all right, emerged the moment my mom and Eric sped off. She wrapped me in a hug, shaking her head in amazement. "I've never seen you stand up to them like that," she said, her voice edged with pride. I still felt my heart hammering in my chest, but there was a distinct sense of relief, too. "I've never had the evidence I needed," I replied. "All those times before, it was just my word versus theirs. Now they can't keep twisting the narrative." We spent a few minutes in the parking lot catching our breath, before I realized I needed to get going. Sure enough, as I was settling back inside my apartment, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus, sounding busier than ever. "Looks like they're ready to talk," he informed me, flipping through papers. "Eric and your parents are already reaching out, wanting to settle this before it blows up into a full-blown legal crisis."
Do you want me to hear them out? Yes, I answered firmly. But I'm not rolling over this time. I want more than just an apology. I want to make sure they never pull something like this again. After I hung up, I paced around my small living room, half expecting my mother to barge through the door. I could practically hear the old excuses. You need to look out for your brother. Or don't do this to me, I'm your mother. But I felt a reserve of strength inside, a certainty that grew from the knowledge that I had done everything right, and now they were on the hook. There would be no more turning the other cheek. Doc Marcus told me he drafted up an injunction that would freeze any remodeling or selling of the Maple Street property. By the next night, the papers had been delivered, causing further uproar among my family. I kept my phone on silent, looking only once in a while to see angry all-caps messages from Eric, accusing me of betrayal. My mother sent a series of voicemails switching between pity and anger, urging me to be reasonable. But their frantic calls and texts no longer made me tremble like before. I deliberately left them all unanswered, though sure enough 2 days later, Marcus confirmed that Eric and my parents wanted to settle quickly. They were spooked by the notion of criminal fraud, which, as Marcus pointed out, was a real possibility given the timeline and those very blunt letters from the lawyer. I wanted my ownership restored, and I wanted them to sign a statement acknowledging they tried to swindle me. If they would do that, we could skip the drawn-out court drama. At our meeting, my stepdad sat quietly, eyes on the floor, while my mother alternated between scowling and pleading. Eric was grim-faced, arms crossed, as though he hated every second of being in that conference room. Their attorney went through the points one by one, reimbursing me for my legal fees, paying me a penalty for damages, and of course returning the house's deed to my name. None of them had the audacity to challenge much, at least not after Marcus pointed to the evidence laid out on the table. The tears finally arrived when my mother realized I wanted their admission of guilt in writing, witnessed by the notary. That was non-negotiable. No more behind-the-scenes trickery. Mom Cork's voice trembled as she signed the last page. My stepdad was stoic, but behind those blank eyes I sensed resentment for having to bend to my demands. Eric didn't speak a single word. It was almost surreal to watch him scribble his name on the confession, acknowledging that transferring the deed had been done under false claims. After all the times I'd been forced to listen to him prattle on about his next business scheme, he now had nothing left to say. Once everything was finalized, I felt an enormous weight lift off my chest. The house was legally mine again, along with compensation that would cover the attorney fees and give me a little extra. But I'd already come to a new conclusion. I didn't want that house. The place I'd poured my savings into had been tainted by their betrayals. I briefly considered moving into it anyway, but something in me recoiled at the idea of living in a space that symbolized the ugliest side of my family. Dynamic thought at the same time, developers had started buying properties in that neighborhood, turning older houses into luxury apartments. I got word that a local firm might be interested in purchasing mine. Considering I now had clear title, there was nothing stopping me from making a sale, so I reached out. They were indeed prepared to offer a sum that exceeded the home's original value. My Aunt Sarah applauded the move, encouraging me to wipe the slate clean and start somewhere fresh. Rachel wholeheartedly agreed, even vowing to help me look for an adorable cottage somewhere closer to the city's outskirts. When I made my decision, I braced myself for another storm from my mother and Eric, and sure enough, they erupted. "You're selling our house," my mother railed, as though she had a legitimate stake in it. "How could you do this after all we've been through?" I quietly corrected her, reminding her that there was no we involved in that purchase, just me and my hard-earned savings. They threatened me with all types of emotional blackmail, but it no longer penetrated. I turned off my phone each time their accusations or crocodile tears rained down. Within the month, the house was under contract with the developer. Standing before the notary a second time, I signed over the property with zero regrets. Suddenly, I had more than enough resources to find something I loved. Maybe a cute little bungalow with a backyard big enough for a vegetable garden. Maybe a spacious condo near the hospital. Possibilities were blossoming, and for the first time, I felt in control of my own life. Without looking back, I walked out, papers in hand, ready to create a life that belonged to me alone. Some people might label what I did as cruel, but I see it as a necessary boundary. For the first time in my life, I refused to set myself on fire just to keep them warm. Let them find their own way. Now, I thought, I had a charming new place to furnish and a garden to plant. Thought the weeks following the sale of the Maple Street house became a period of dramatic change. I put the extra funds I'd gained toward a cozy cottage I found just outside the city. It featured a wraparound porch, plenty of sunlight, and the sweetest little yard, perfect for growing flowers and fresh vegetables. Rachel was eager to help me settle in. We spent an entire weekend painting walls in shades of soft cream and pale sage green, a deliberate choice to fill the place with tranquility and a sense of renewal. We splashed color on the front door, too, hanging a cheerful wreath that declared this cottage a bright, safe space. During the unpacking chaos, my phone kept lighting up with texts from various relatives,
Some scolded me for being selfish or ungrateful, insisting I had turned my back on the people who raised me. Others tried stirring my guilt by painting Mom as heartbroken and desperate. The only person who remained supportive was Aunt Sarah, who seemed to understand my point of view better than anyone else. She encouraged me to embrace this fresh start, telling me she was proud of how I'd stood my ground. More than once, the phone calls from my mom would switch between raw anger and melodramatic pleas, but I ignored the guilt trips, reminding myself that they had tried to rip away the future I had worked so hard to create. The moment I felt any lingering self doubt, I would catch a glimpse of my cozy living room filled with secondhand furniture I'd lovingly restored, and remember how much happier I was without their constant interference. I quickly fell in love with my new day to day routine. The cottage was only a short drive to Memorial Hospital, which let me sleep in an extra half hour before each shift. In the mornings, I'd stroll out to the yard, sipping coffee while admiring the emerging blooms. On my days off, Rachel and I combed through local thrift shops, collecting interesting finds, a reading lamp with a vintage brass stand, a shabby chic bookshelf we repainted bright white. More than just decorating, it felt like we were forging a genuine nest for me, a place that offered the safety and comfort I'd never quite found in my mother's home. Though once I was as settled as I could be, I turned my attention to the garden. This was the dream I'd held on to through all those extra shifts, the image that had floated in my mind whenever I pictured owning a home. My weekends became filled with digging, planting seeds, and mapping out beautifully neat rows for herbs and vegetables. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and even some strawberries went in, joined by bright zinnias and cheery marigolds. It was the kind of peaceful outdoor work that cleared my mind and soothed my spirit. Whenever the memory of my family's betrayal threatened to swirl back up, I'd plunge my fingers deeper into the earth, renewed by the tangible sense of growth. Aunt Rachel would tease me about the fence I built around the perimeter. You're all about boundaries now, aren't you? She joked with a grin. And she wasn't wrong. I took great pride in putting up a physical structure that sent a message. This is my domain, a place of calm, and not just anybody gets to barge in. Don't news of my triumph over the fraudulent deeds spread among extended relatives, and even some my triumph over the fraudulent deeds spread among extended relatives, and even some neighbors who vaguely knew the story. There were whispers that I had been cruel not to give my mother a second chance, but Aunt Sarah defended me whenever she could, pointing out that I had been giving second chances my entire life until it nearly cost me everything. In her opinion, I'd done the right thing at last. Better late than never. Now at Memorial Hospital, my colleagues noticed changes in me as well. I used to be the nurse who volunteered for any holiday or weekend shift because I felt obligated or uncertain of my own plans. Now I established clear work-life boundaries. If I wanted a particular holiday off, I made it known. When a coworker asked me to cover his extra shift, I would kindly assess whether it fitted to my schedule rather than automatically sacrificing my free time. This new level of assertiveness surprised people, but for the most part they respected it. Funnily enough, my job performance improved too. I was less exhausted, more focused, and the patients benefited from getting me at my best.
One day, while I was on a break in the staff room, a younger nurse approached me, eyes red from crying. She was struggling with personal issues and felt others at the hospital took advantage of her willingness to step up at every opportunity. I've heard how you stood up to your own family, she said haltingly, and it makes me think I can put my foot down too. Any advice? I paused, thinking about how to answer in a way that cut to the heart of things. Don't wait until you're drowning to stand up, because by then you can hardly speak. Set your limits early and don't budge, I told her gently. The people who really care will respect you for it. The conversation brought to mind my mother's countless phone calls and how I used to cave in every time. No longer, I had new obligations to my patients, to my well being, and to this newfound life I was carving out for myself. Each time I felt the slightest twinge of sorrow for how things had unraveled with my parents, I reminded myself that if I gave in again, I would be repeating the same old pattern, losing my voice and my money to their demands. Every few weeks, I might receive an update about Eric. He was living back with our parents, apparently working a retail job just to make ends meet, and his wife Jessica had filed for divorce. They had a new baby to care for, although Jessica's family was helping her raise the little one. The weight of Eric's endless financial missteps and the legal fiasco over the house had left him deflated. Or so I heard. People hinted that he was always complaining about me being the ruthless sister who refused to share her good fortune. But those rumors rarely touched me now. Aunt Sarah, on the other hand, remained a steady ally. Every so often, she'd drop by with groceries or bring homemade muffins, grateful I hadn't cut her out as well. I'm glad you're flourishing, Mia, she said one Sunday morning, perched on a stool in my freshly painted kitchen. We were sipping tea and enjoying the warm scent of blueberry pastries. Your mother thinks I've taken your side, but there's only one side here decency. She was wrong, and until she accepts that, there's not much else to discuss. Hearing Aunt Sarah say it so plainly made it easier for me to continue standing firm. The next time my phone buzzed with a call from my mother, I recognized it as an all too familiar moment. She was probably reaching out about something financial, though I couldn't be certain. With a calm I never used to have, I let it go straight to voicemail and set my phone down. I wasn't going to rob myself of another quiet afternoon, especially not one when I might take a walk over to the farmer's market or visit the local pond. I decided that preserving my serene new world mattered far more than continuing any toxic cycle. Dot over time, I even started feeling glimpses of forgiveness. Not for their sake, but for mine. Like dispensing with old bitterness was the only way to truly flourish. It didn't mean I forgot or that I was ready to welcome them back. It simply meant I was moving forward without letting their betrayal poison the rest of my life. Whether they recognized or lamented their actions was up to them. I had a veggie patch to tend and an actual future worth protecting. A year slipped by after my decisive stand, and the changes in my life still astonish me. My little cottage has turned into a haven overflowing with calm and contentment. I've filled its rooms with fresh possibilities, a reading nook in one corner, a sewing station in another, all the cozy details I never had before. Some weekends I visit local shops with Rachel, hunting for whimsical trinkets that transform the space into a reflection of who I truly am. She jokes that I'm making up for lost time, and maybe she's right. The garden I planted has flourished beyond my wildest hopes. The tomato vines climbed high, popping out bright red fruit, while clusters of cucumbers and peppers sprouted in tidy rows. A few neighbors wandered over, curious about my green thumb. Some days I'll exchange extra herbs for a handful of fresh eggs or a homemade pie. It feels like I landed in a tiny oasis where community spirit thrives. Aunt Sarah brings her grandchildren to help water the plants, and I delight in showing them how new life grows from a tiny seed dot. Such quiet joys sharpen my realization that the turmoil of the past year brought me to a place of stability and self worth. Every so often, guilt tries to creep back in. I picture my mother probably complaining to anyone who'll listen about how cold hearted I became, or Eric coping with an avalanche of his own messes. But then I focus on the visible evidence of how far I've come, and the guilt dissolves before it gains any traction. Meanwhile, my career at Memorial Hospital has surged ahead. Without the weight of manipulative family drama, I can pour my energy into doing what I love, caring for patients. Recently, I received a promotion to a leadership role, guiding a group of new nurses through the intense demands of the ICU. I noticed the spark in their eyes when they realize someone believes in them. There's a kind of kinship among staff who know how challenging the medical field can be. I don't give them my entire backstory, but they glean glimpses of it whenever they see me standing firm, refusing to be walked over. I've learned to say no in both my personal and professional life. I want the occasional weekend off to spend in my yard or with friends, and I no longer consider that selfish. One of the hospital directors asked me to work on a big holiday, expecting me to jump at overtime like I used to, but I calmly informed her that I already had plans. In years past, I would have caved the moment someone added, "But we desperately need you." Now, I weigh my options before committing. There was surprise on the director's face, yet she nodded, perhaps respecting my newfound confidence. One morning, on my way to grab a latte before my shift, I ran into my stepdad George in the parking lot. He looked older, more worn down, and he hesitated before stepping forward to say hello. "How are you, Mia?" he managed, fiddling with his car keys. "I'm all right," I answered, keeping my tone polite but neutral. There was an awkward moment, as if he was searching for a way to bridge the gap. I made it simpler for him. "I'm actually running late for work," I said softly, moving past him. "Take care." In a different time, I might have felt the urge to stay, to see if he needed help, but now I could feel that my presence wasn't a balm for their problems anymore, and I was at peace with that. Toward the end of summer, I heard that Eric's wife Jessica had filed for a restraining order to keep him from interfering in her new life. He apparently dove into another pyramid scheme type gig, pleading for money from anyone who would listen. My parents, pressed for cash, found themselves forced to sell their rental home and move into a smaller place. For a moment, I imagined the frantic phone calls and voicemails I'd intentionally missed. In the past, I would have jumped into the chaos, offering money or solutions, but no longer. A boundary is a boundary dot. Even with the negativity swirling around them, my days remained steady and calm. I slowly found myself making new friends outside work. My next door neighbor, a yoga instructor named Janine, introduced me to her group sessions in the local park, leading me to a circle of people who valued wellness and mental peace.
We often end classes by sharing personal victories, how someone overcame anxiety or redeemed a flailing relationship. I haven't told them the full story, but I've dropped enough hints about toxic relatives and the hard won decision to protect my independence. Sometimes, while watering the plants at dusk, I reflect on how the old me would have reacted if someone had told her she'd end up here, joyful, stable, and unafraid of conflict. That version of myself might not have believed it. I recall the terrified young woman who lost her savings and feared a lifetime of being dismissed by her own family. But it's in that memory that I find the deepest sense of gratitude for the path I've taken. I set aside the burdens they thrust upon me, and for that my world bloomed in a way I never thought possible. Even the final phone calls I'd screened from my mom felt strangely liberating. She seemed outraged at my refusal to take care of Eric's latest crisis, as if it was a sacred duty I had neglected. But each time I blocked out the sound of her scolding, turned my attention back to nurturing the life I'd built, and felt no tug of obligation. When the last of the tomatoes ripened bright and firm, I gathered them in a tiny basket for the neighbors, marveling at how something so simple could feel so free.